Okay, so the basic premise of this entire channel and all of the advice that I give is that men and women are different. Understanding these differences is essential for men. Men need to understand what women want, what women are attracted to. The short answer is women are attracted to your masculinity. She doesn't need you to be feminine. She's already got femininity inside herself. She's looking to you to provide what she doesn't have, which is masculinity. And so embrace that. Become masculine. So you need to do the opposite of what the culture keeps telling you to do. They say your masculinity is toxic. I say the opposite. I say your masculinity is the best part of you and you need to embrace it. Now, there are some fringe people who believe that there is no difference between men and women. They're in complete denial of biology. It's a perspective that is anti-science, it's anti-common sense, and to be honest, it's only held by a very fringe extremist group, on the very edges of society. It's not a mainstream opinion, and so it's not really worth even debunking. Who is worth engaging with are those people who agree with me that men and women are different, but believe that those differences come from a different basis. I say it's biology, and I point to the processes of evolution for how men and women were shaped to be different. But there are those that disagree with that perspective. They say that it is culture that makes men and women different. It may be the case that more women are nurses and more men are engineers, but that's not because women are inherently more caring and men are inherently more mechanical. It's because we've been socially indoctrinated into these roles. They believe in what's called the social roles theory, and it runs counter to my perspective and the perspective held by evolutionary biologists. So why are men typically leaders in relationships? Why is it less acceptable for women to be promiscuous? Why do men focus on looks and women on wealth and status? I say it's because of biology and evolution, but those who believe in the social roles theory believe that it's culture and society that's to blame. If you're a genuine believer in the social roles theory, then it's quite natural that you would do everything that you can to undermine traditional gender roles in our society. You would have the sincere belief that all of these differences that we observe between men and women are purely the result of cultural attitudes that are necessarily oppressive. You would believe that the ideal society is one in which men and women have no observable differences. I think that that perspective is ridiculous. I think that it's anti-science. I don't think that you're ever going to be able to eradicate the differences between the genders because I don't believe that they're primarily cultural. I believe that they're biological. I think that the ideal in society isn't to eradicate the differences between men and women, but to celebrate those differences. Men and women are different, but it's in those differences that men and women are so fascinating and beautiful. I say let men be men and let women be women. Let's stop competing and start cooperating. We're on the same team, and this team is going to function a lot better if everybody does what they do best, if they stick to their roles. Let men be masculine, let women be feminine. Now, recently, there was a big victory for evolutionary psychology and a big blow to those who believe in the social roles theory. I'm talking about a study that was published in December in 2018. The title was, "Are sex differences in preferences for physical attractiveness and good earning capacity in potential mates smaller in countries with greater gender equality?" This was a major study, truly fantastic research. I'm going to share the results of this study with you now because I really enjoy doing videos like this every now and then. It's not just opinion. This is like scientific journalism. And I think that it's important to know because if you come across somebody who's a sincere believer in the social roles theory and is trying to convince you that there's no difference between the genders, it's important that you know what the science says, that you know what the research findings have been so that you can point them to this stuff. That way, if they're blaming everything on society, on culture, on the patriarchy, you know what the facts are and you can comfortably ignore their opinions. So a little background on the study. It was done over 36 different countries. 36, so like I said, it was a big undertaking. These countries were ranked based on statistics from the United Nations, from countries with the greatest gender equality at the top to the least gender equality at the bottom. So imagine your sort of Scandinavian countries at the top, highly progressive, feminist, equal opportunity for men and women. Then imagine your more conservative countries at the bottom, where men and women are still largely confined to their gender roles. Like I said before, the study was extremely thorough. They interviewed thousands and thousands of people. What they wanted to find out is what characteristics were most attractive in a mate. Things like physical attractiveness or good earning capacity. Now, according to social roles theory, the reason why women are attracted to wealthy men who make a lot of money is because for so long in the culture, women weren't able to work. They didn't have jobs and they were dependent upon their husbands. So they had to be attracted to men who made a lot of money in order for them to survive. But if that's true, then what the data should show in the research is that if a country has achieved a larger level of gender equality and women are making the same amount of money as men, then that preference for a man who's wealthy should start to drop off. When you're comparing one of those progressive countries with one of the more conservative countries, there should be a stronger preference in the conservative countries from the women for a man who makes a lot of money, and it should be almost nothing for the progressive countries. After all, if the only reason why women like men who are wealthy is because of culture, then if the culture changes, then it seems logical that the female preference for money should change as well. So what did the data say? Were the social theorists correct? I think you know that they weren't. Let's look at the graph. This is what you call a violin plot, and the bulges, like here and here, this is where most responses were. So it's pretty much what you would expect. You see men placing higher importance on physical attractiveness and women placing higher importance on earning capacity. One interesting thing to take note of is that women's responses are a bit more all over the place. Some women cared and some women just didn't. You know, it results in a much more narrow violin plot, as you can see, and that demonstrates how evenly spread female responses were. Whereas when you compare it to the men's violin plots, you see that they have much thicker bulges. No pun intended, but if you look at like the attractiveness graph here, you see basically every guy said that looks are important. You know, the same goes for earning capacity. You know, barely any guy cares. That's why it's so thick at the bottom, because that's where all of the responses were. But so far, this has just confirmed what we already know. Men are attracted to good-looking women, and women are attracted to wealthy men. But does that change based on country? Remember, this is the whole point of the study. When taking into account the United Nations statistics for either the Gender Inequality Index or the Gender Development Index, is there a shift in female and male preferences? The answer is no. I'm going to read you some direct quotes from the study. We saw no evidence that the sex difference in preference for physical attractiveness was greater in countries with greater gender equality. These results present little compelling evidence for the social role theory of sex differences in mate preferences. In layman's terms, it didn't matter whether or not the country was progressive or conservative. It was consistent across the board. The preferences that men and women had for the characteristics they wanted in a partner were the same across the globe. It doesn't matter because the difference between men and women goes deeper than culture. It's in our biology, and I wouldn't expect our dating preferences to change anytime soon. Even if we reach some point in the future where women are out earning men 2-to-1, I still think that women are primarily going to be attracted to wealthy men. That's because it's a biologically hardwired preference, and no amount of cultural change can shift that. So don't listen to whatever cultural messages are telling you that you need to repress your masculinity. Do the opposite, embrace your masculinity. That's where your strength is. And while you're at it, don't feel guilty about desiring a traditionally feminine woman as your partner. Of course you like a feminine woman because her femininity is her strength. That's what she has to offer. Of course, the social role theorists are going to say that you're patriarchal or that you're culturally indoctrinated or whatever nonsense. You just tell them that they're anti-science and you point them to this study.